Police, I need to report a home invasion. There's a black woman inside my neighbor's house, and I'm sure he's not home. Patricia Coleman's voice sounded authoritative and confident on the phone as she watched the commotion in the mansion next door from her kitchen window. Across the property, inside the luxurious 3-story Beverly Hills residence, Carmen Rodriguez continued her cleaning work, completely oblivious to the storm brewing. At 42, Carmen had been working as a housekeeper for over 15 years and never imagined that an ordinary Tuesday morning would turn into the most humiliating day of her life. She's rummaging through everything. She's turned the whole house upside down. Patricia continued her elaborate lie to the dispatcher. My neighbors left yesterday, and clearly this person is taking advantage of the situation to steal whatever she can. Carmen had arrived punctually at 8 in the morning, as she had done every Tuesday and Friday for the past 3 years. She used her key, deactivated the alarm with a code she knew by heart, and began the routine she had mastered perfectly. What she didn't know was that Patricia Coleman, her nosy 58-year-old neighbor, had other plans for that morning. Patricia had lost her job as a sales manager 6 months ago and had since spent her days watching over the neighborhood as if it were her personal responsibility to maintain order. The truth was that Patricia felt a corrosive envy of the Torres family, the owners of the mansion. How had a Hispanic family managed to buy a $2 million house right next to her? How long will it take you to get here? Patricia asked, feigning urgency. Because she may be passing information to a gang. You know how these people operate. Inside the house, Carmen was vacuuming the Persian rug in the main living room when she heard sirens approaching. For a brief moment, she thought it was just an ambulance passing by. She had no idea that in less than 5 minutes, her life would be turned upside down by a woman she had never even exchanged a simple good morning with. What Patricia didn't know, and would find out in the most humiliating way possible, was that Carmen wasn't just any cleaning lady. Behind the simple, hard-working woman was a story that would make Patricia question every prejudiced decision she had ever made in her life. Carmen stopped the vacuum cleaner when she heard violent knocking on the door. Her heart raced, not out of fear, but out of something deeper she had learned to recognize after years of facing situations like this. It was the moment she would need to use all the calm and dignity she had developed through a journey no one around her could even imagine. As she walked toward the door, Carmen took a deep breath and smiled discreetly. Patricia Coleman had chosen the wrong person to humiliate, and she was about to discover that some battles are lost before they even begin. If you have ever experienced prejudice or injustice, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because this story will show you how the sweetest revenge is the one that doesn't even need to be planned. 3 police cars arrived in less than 5 minutes, their sirens cutting through the morning silence of Beverly Hills as if it were a highly dangerous operation. Patricia watched from her window with undisguised satisfaction, finally feeling in control of something after months of frustration and personal humiliation. Finally, someone is going to put these people in their place, she muttered to herself, adjusting the curtains to get a better view of the action she had orchestrated. Officers Miller, Thompson, and Rodriguez got out of their cars with the posture of men who expected to find a real emergency. Patricia ran out of her house, assuming the role of the concerned neighbor and exemplary citizen she had always wanted to portray. Officers, thank you for arriving so quickly, Patricia said with false authority, crossing her arms and pointing to the Torres mansion. She's still inside. I don't know what she's doing, but she clearly shouldn't be there. Inside, Carmen watched the police arrive through the living room window. For a moment, her face showed an expression that someone less observant might mistake for fear. But anyone who really knew Carmen Rodriguez would recognize that look. It was the same one she had worn before when facing much more challenging situations throughout her life. Carmen calmly walked over to her purse and took out her phone. Her fingers dialed a number with the precision of someone who had made that call many times before. The line was answered on the second ring. Hi, it's me. Yes, it happened again, this time in Beverly Hills. Her voice was low, controlled, but laden with the weariness of someone who had faced exactly this type of situation too many times before. No, I'm fine. I may need you in a little while. Outside. Patricia continued her performance for the officers, every word carefully calculated to paint Carmen in the most suspicious light possible. I know everyone in this neighborhood, officers. I've lived here for 12 years. This Hispanic family moved in just 6 months ago, and since then, it's been one problem after another. Patricia lied blatantly, despite knowing that the Torres family were respected. Quiet residents, strange cars pulling up at all hours, loud parties. And now this, people breaking into the house when they're not even home. Officer Miller took notes, while Officer Thompson looked slightly uncomfortable with Patricia's tone. Officer Rodriguez, ironically sharing Carmen's last name, maintained a professional, neutral expression. "Are you sure the owners aren't home?" Officer Thompson asked. "Absolutely," Patricia replied without hesitation. "I saw him leaving last night with suitcases. He clearly went on a trip. And now this woman shows up as if she owns the place." What Patricia didn't mention was that she had spent the last few weeks obsessively watching the Torres family's schedule. When they left, when they returned, and who visited them. Her surveillance had become an unhealthy obsession that she justified as protecting the neighborhood. Carmen opened the door before the officers could even knock. Her posture was upright, her hands visible, and her face showed the calm of someone who knew exactly how to behave in police situations. A calm that came from experience, not innocence. "Good morning, officers. I imagine you're here because of the neighbor's complaint." Carmen spoke with a clarity and politeness that immediately contrasted with the hysteria Patricia had displayed in her 911 call. Officer Miller stepped forward. "Ma'am, we need to check your identification and confirm that you are authorized to be on this property." Carmen smiled subtly, a smile that someone more attentive might interpret as irony, not nervousness. "Of course, officer. I have all the necessary documentation." She reached into her purse again, pulling out a well-maintained leather wallet. Patricia watched from the sidewalk, waiting for the moment when Carmen would be exposed as an intruder. In her mind, the public humiliation that would follow would validate all her prejudices and insecurities. "Here is my identification," Carmen said, handing over the document. "And here is the house key provided by the owners." She held up a keychain with multiple keys. "I've been working for the Torres family for 3 years, every Tuesday and Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Officer Rodriguez examined the documents. "And the owners know you're here today?" "Perfectly," Carmen replied, taking out her phone. "I can call Mrs. Isabella Torres right now if necessary." "They're in London for a medical conference. Dr. Torres is a cardiologist at Cedars-Sinai." Patricia felt the first sign that something was not going as planned. Carmen's confidence, the organized documentation, the precise information about the owners, none of it fit the break-in narrative she had so carefully constructed. "That doesn't prove anything," Patricia shouted from the sidewalk, her voice rising an octave with anxiety. "Anyone can get a key copied. Anyone can pretend to have authorization." Officer Thompson looked at Patricia with growing discomfort. Her insistence on escalating the situation, even in the face of contrary evidence, was beginning to sound more like personal obsession than legitimate concern. Carmen watched Patricia for a moment, and something shifted in her expression. It was almost imperceptible, but anyone skilled at reading people would see the transformation, from passive victim to someone who was tired of being underestimated. "Officers," Carmen said calmly, "would you like to come in and verify that there's nothing wrong here? I can show you that I know this house inside and out, where all the valuables are, and I can prove that I am doing exactly the job I was hired to do." It was at this moment that Carmen did something that surprised everyone. She pulled a second ID out of her wallet, one that left the 3 officers completely silent. Patricia couldn't see what it was from where she stood, but she noticed the immediate change in the officer's demeanor. The expression of routine authority gave way to something that seemed almost like respect. What Patricia Coleman didn't know and would discover in the most humiliating way possible was that Carmen Rodriguez carried much more than cleaning rags and chemicals. She carried a story that would completely transform the dynamics of that morning and make it clear who really didn't belong in that situation. While Patricia continued to shout accusations from the sidewalk, unaware that the officers were no longer listening. Carmen maintained that subtle smile, the smile of someone with decades of experience dealing with people who underestimated her. This time, however, the underestimation would cost more than Patricia could imagine. Officer Rodriguez examined Carmen's second ID for several long seconds, then looked at his colleagues with an expression Patricia couldn't quite decipher from the sidewalk. Was it respect, surprise? Whatever it was definitely not what she had expected to see when she called the police. "Miss Rodriguez," Officer Miller began, her voice now carrying a completely different tone. "We apologize for the inconvenience. Clearly there has been a misunderstanding here." Patricia felt the first real sign of panic. "Misunderstanding? What do you mean, misunderstanding? I clearly saw a black woman rummaging through my neighbor's house. How could that be a misunderstanding?" "Wait a minute," Patricia shouted, marching toward the group. "You haven't checked anything properly yet. She could have forged those documents. These people are experts at deceiving authorities." Officer Thompson intercepted her halfway. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to calm down and let us do our job." Carmen watched Patricia approach with that familiar expression, the same one she had seen hundreds of times throughout her career. It was the look of someone who discovered that the world didn't work exactly as they imagined, and who reacted even more aggressively to keep their illusions intact. "Officers," Carmen said calmly, "I know the neighbor is concerned, but perhaps we can resolve this in a way that benefits everyone. I can show you that I know this property perfectly well, and I can also call the Torres family to confirm my authorization." Patricia didn't like the growing confidence in Carmen's voice. "I don't care how many people she can bribe or convince. I know what I saw, and what I saw was suspicious behavior." It was then that Carmen did something that surprised everyone. Instead of defending herself again, she smiled. Not a nervous or submissive smile, but the smile of someone who had finally decided to stop holding her cards close and start playing the game for real. "You know, Patricia," Carmen said, using her neighbor's name for the first time, "you're right about one thing. You really don't know me." Carmen picked up her phone and dialed a number. "Isabella." "Hi, honey. Yes, I'm at your house. We have a situation here that needs your attention." Patricia was taken aback to hear Carmen speaking so familiarly with Isabella Torres. It wasn't the formality one would expect from a cleaning lady addressing her boss. It was the tone of friendship. "She'll be here in 15 minutes, Carmen announced, putting her phone away. "She was shopping at the Beverly Center when I called. I imagine that will resolve any questions about my presence here." Officer Rodriguez consulted his watch. "Perfect. We'll wait for confirmation from the owner." Patricia felt control of the situation slipping through her fingers. 15 minutes? You're going to wait 15 minutes because of a phone call anyone could make? She could be buying time to hide evidence. "Evidence of what exactly?" Officer Thompson asked, her patience clearly wearing thin. "Can you specify what crime you believe is being committed here?" Patricia hesitated. In truth, she had never thought of a specific crime. She just knew she didn't like seeing Carmen there and assumed the officers would automatically share her discomfort. Trespassing, obviously, and probably theft. "These people are always up to something." Officer Miller wrote down Patricia's words verbatim. "These people? Can you specify who you mean?" Patricia realized she had exposed more than she intended. I mean suspicious people. People who don't belong in the neighborhood." Carmen listened to this exchange with growing interest. Every word Patricia uttered was being mentally catalogued, not out of revenge but out of professional experience. Carmen had long ago learned that people like Patricia always revealed themselves when pressed hard enough. "Officers," Carmen said softly, "while we wait for Isabella, may I suggest that the neighbor wait on her own property? I imagine she has more important things to do than stand here supervising my work." Patricia interpreted this as an attempt to get rid of her, which only intensified her determination. "No, I'm staying here until this is resolved. Someone needs to protect this neighborhood from people like her." Carmen's phone buzzed again. She answered quickly. "Can you come?" "Great." Patricia watched the second call with growing anxiety. Who was James? Why was Carmen gathering people to the scene? Officer Rodriguez, who had remained quiet during the call, approached Carmen. "Ma'am, may I ask who else is coming?" A colleague who has experience with this type of misunderstanding, Carmen replied diplomatically. Someone who can help clarify the situation in a way that benefits everyone involved. Patricia didn't like the word colleague one bit. What kind of colleague would a cleaning lady have who could clarify situations? I didn't give permission for more people to come into my neighborhood, Patricia protested. You're letting her turn this into a circus. With all due respect, Officer Thompson replied, this is not your property, and you have no authority to prevent legitimate visits to neighbors. Carmen watched Patricia become increasingly agitated and recognized the signs. It was always like this. People who used prejudice as the basis for their judgments inevitably reached a point where reality contradicted their expectations, and they reacted with even more irrationality. During her years working for the Torres family, Carmen had dealt with similar situations before. Neighbors who questioned her presence, service providers who doubted her authority to make decisions about the house, delivery people who insisted on speaking to the owners even when she clearly demonstrated her knowledge of every detail of the property. But Patricia Coleman had made a mistake others hadn't. She had escalated the situation to the point of involving the police, and in doing so, she had forced Carmen to reveal cards she usually preferred to keep close to her chest. Carmen's phone pinged again. It was a text message. She read it quickly, allowing herself a small smile. Isabella is 5 minutes away, she announced, and James should be here shortly after. Patricia looked around at the officers, searching for some sign that they shared her frustration. But what she saw only confused her further. The officers seemed calm. There was no urgency, no concern for safety, nothing to indicate that they still considered Carmen a threat. Why are you treating her like she's the victim? Patricia finally exploded. I'm the one who called you. I'm the one who's concerned about the safety of the neighborhood. Officer Miller looked at Patricia with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. Ms. Coleman, can we talk privately for a moment? Patricia nodded, hoping she would finally get the attention she deserved. They walked a few feet away out of Carmen's earshot. Ms. Coleman, Officer Miller began quietly, you need to understand that the situation here is not what you initially described. Ms. Rodriguez has legitimate documentation, clearly knows the property, and has confirmed authorization from the owners. But I know what I saw, Patricia insisted. She was acting suspiciously. Defining suspicious behavior can be subjective, Officer Thompson added diplomatically. And sometimes our perceptions can be influenced by factors that may not actually be relevant in determining whether a crime is being committed. Patricia felt as if she were being reprimanded, and she didn't like it one bit. Are you implying that I'm prejudiced? The officers exchanged glances. We're suggesting, Officer Miller said carefully, that it might be best to wait for the owners to arrive before reaching any definitive conclusions. As this conversation took place, Carmen remained near the entrance to the house, observing quietly. She had dealt with hundreds of Patricia Colemans throughout her career, and she knew exactly how these situations played out. What? Patricia didn't know, and would discover in the next few minutes in a way that would completely change her perspective on who had underestimated whom. Was that Carmen Rodriguez? Was not just a housekeeper for the Torres family. Carmen was someone Patricia should have researched before deciding to make her an enemy. She was someone whose connections, experience, and resources went far beyond what appeared on the surface. More importantly, she had learned long ago that the best way to deal with prejudice was not merely to survive it, but to use others' underestimation as a strategic advantage. As they waited for Isabella Torres and the mysterious James to arrive, Carmen maintained that subtle smile that came from years of experience dealing with situations where her appearance and position led people to draw the worst and most inaccurate conclusions about who she really was. Patricia Coleman had chosen the wrong battle, with the wrong person at the wrong time, and she was about to discover that some people are far more dangerous when underestimated than when feared. A black Mercedes-Benz pulled up in front of the mansion right on time. Isabella Torres stepped out of the car with the natural elegance of someone accustomed to comfort, but her expression showed genuine concern. At 35, Isabella was a renowned cardiologist, and she had abandoned her shopping the moment Carmen called. "Carmen, dear," Isabella cried, rushing toward the house. "Is everything okay? Tell me what happened." Patricia watched with growing discomfort. The familiarity between the two women was not professional, it was personal. Isabella hugged Carmen as though she were a younger sister, not merely an employee. "Everything's under control now," Carmen replied, returning the embrace. "But our neighbor here decided I was trespassing on your property." Isabella turned to Patricia with an expression of confusion mixed with irritation. "Excuse me, but who exactly are you?" "I'm Patricia Coleman. I live next door," Patricia said, trying to regain some authority. "And I was protecting your property from an obvious invasion." "Invasion?" Isabella laughed, though it was not a friendly laugh. "Carmen has had a key to this house for 3 years. She takes care of everything when we travel, receives our packages, and is practically part of our family." Officer Miller cleared his throat. "Ms. Torres, can we confirm that Ms. Rodriguez has permission to be here?" "Permission?" Isabella repeated, her voice rising. "Officers, are you seriously questioning one of the most honest people I know because of a malicious complaint from this paranoid neighbor?" Patricia felt the first real pang of dread. She had made a terrible mistake. Before she could respond, a second car pulled up. A black BMW parked behind Isabella's Mercedes. A tall man in his 50s stepped out, carrying himself with the confidence of someone used to commanding situations. He wore a dark suit and carried a leather briefcase that suggested authority. "James Morrison, County Legal Department," he introduced himself, showing his ID to the officers. "I received a call about a possible case of racial profiling being investigated here." Patricia paled. "County Legal Department? Why was a government lawyer involved in a simple neighborhood dispute?" "Carmen called me because situations like this have become a troubling pattern," James continued, pulling a tablet from his briefcase. "False reports filed against people of color working in predominantly white neighborhoods. It is our job to document and address these cases." Carmen smiled discreetly as she watched Patricia's expression shift from confidence to panic. "James, this is Mrs. Coleman," Carmen explained evenly. "She called the police because she saw me cleaning the Torres house." "I see," James said, typing notes on the tablet. "Mrs. Coleman, can you explain exactly what you observed that led you to believe a crime was being committed?" Patricia stammered, realizing her words were being officially recorded. "She was rummaging around the house. The neighbors weren't—" "Did you confirm with the owners that Ms. Rodriguez was authorized to be here?" James asked. "I didn't need to confirm. It was obvious." "Obvious why?" "Please," James interrupted firmly. "Be specific." Patricia looked around desperately for support but found only disapproving glances. The officers looked uncomfortable. Isabella was visibly irritated. And Carmen maintained that calm expression, an expression Patricia now realized was dangerous. "Mrs. Coleman," Isabella cut in, her voice sharp. "You called the police on a woman who has worked for my family for years, who has our keys, our alarm codes, and our complete trust. Why? She seemed suspicious," Patricia muttered weakly. "Suspicious how?" Carmen asked, her voice calm but filled with authority Patricia hadn't noticed before. "Can you specify what exactly was suspicious about my behavior?" Patricia froze. Any answer would expose her prejudice explicitly and publicly. James continued typing. "For our records, Mrs. Coleman, can you confirm whether your report was based on any specific evidence of criminal activity? Or was it based on Ms. Rodriguez's appearance and race?" "This is ridiculous!" Patricia exploded. "You're trying to make me look racist when I was just protecting the neighborhood." "No one is trying to make you look like anything," Carmen said softly. "You are revealing yourself." Then, for the first time that evening, Carmen decided to play the card she had been holding. "James, I think it's time Mrs. Coleman knew about my other role." James nodded. "Officers, Ms. Torres, Mrs. Coleman, allow me to formally introduce Dr. Carmen Rodriguez, Senior Civil Rights Consultant for our department and specialist in cases of racial discrimination." The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia stood completely still, as if the words could not penetrate her mind. "Dr. Rodriguez works part-time for the Torres family by personal choice," James continued. "She enjoys manual labor as a way to relax from her professional responsibilities." but her main work is investigating and prosecuting cases, just like the one we witnessed today. Carmen smiled, finally allowing herself a hint of satisfaction. Ms. Coleman, thank you for providing me with a perfect case study of racial profiling in action. It will be very useful in my upcoming lectures on implicit bias. Patricia tried to speak, but only managed incoherent sounds. The reality that she had chosen to antagonize a civil rights expert was slowly sinking in. The officers were extremely professional, Carmen continued. But this incident will be documented as an example of how complaints can be motivated by racial bias rather than evidence of any crime. Isabella shook her head in disbelief. Patricia, you've been living among us for months. You never tried to get to know us, never tried to be a real neighbor. You just watched and judged. James closed his tablet. Ms. Coleman, you did not commit any technical crime today, but this incident will be recorded. I strongly suggest you reflect on how your assumptions nearly caused the public humiliation of an innocent woman. Patricia finally found her voice, but only to whisper. I didn't know. We didn't seem what? Carmen asked gently. Prosperous, educated, deserving of basic respect. The question hung unanswered in the air. Patricia realized that anything she said would only dig the hole she had created even deeper. For the first time, she was confronted with the real consequences of her prejudice. Carmen smiled, knowing that sometimes the best revenge is simply to be exactly who you are, and let others reveal exactly who they are, too. 6 months later, Carmen Rodriguez stood on the main stage of the Los Angeles Convention Center, receiving the National Civil Rights Award for her pioneering work in combating racial prejudice. An audience of more than 3,000 people rose to their feet in prolonged applause as she held the trophy symbolizing decades of fighting for justice. This award is not just mine, Carmen said into the microphone, her voice echoing through the packed auditorium. It belongs to everyone who faces discrimination every day and chooses to respond with dignity instead of hatred. In the front row, Isabella Torres applauded with tears in her eyes, proud of the woman who had become much more than an employee. She was family, James Morrison, now promoted to regional director of the Civil Rights Department, smiled, knowing that Patricia Coleman's case had become a landmark example in his training programs on implicit bias. Meanwhile, a few miles away, Patricia Coleman carried her last boxes out of her Beverly Hills home. Social pressure and complete isolation from her neighbors had forced her to sell the property for far less than it was worth. No one spoke to her anymore. Former friends avoided her. She had become synonymous with shame in the community. The incident had spread on social media after James used it as an educational example, omitting names but leaving enough detail for every Beverly Hills resident to recognize the situation. Patricia discovered that being known as the racist neighbor was a label that would follow her wherever she went. Carmen continued working part-time for the Torres family, not out of financial necessity, but because she found peace in manual labor. It gave her moments of reflection and respite from the heavy responsibilities of her main career. The irony was not lost on anyone. Patricia had tried to humiliate her for being just a cleaning lady, yet Carmen had turned that supposed weakness into her greatest strength. The best revenge, Carmen said as she concluded her acceptance speech, is not to destroy those who try to harm us. It is to build something so great, so meaningful, that their attempts to diminish us become irrelevant in the face of what we achieve. 3 years later, Carmen founded the Rodriguez Institute for Social Justice, funded by a $10 million donation from a businessman moved by her story. The institute offered free legal aid to victims of discrimination and trained organizations on how to identify and dismantle systemic bias. Patricia, meanwhile, never recovered. She moved into a small apartment in a town where no one knew her. But she carried the bitterness of having destroyed her own life with the hatred she had cultivated. Her ex-husband, upon learning of the incident through mutual acquaintances, sent her a single message. Now I understand why our daughter no longer speaks to me. She inherited your intolerance. Carmen's story became legendary in Beverly Hills, not as a tale of revenge, but as proof that true greatness lies in transcending the limitations others try to impose. She proved that when you know who you are, no amount of prejudice can define your destiny. If this story touched your heart and showed you that dignity always wins over prejudice, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove the best response to discrimination is absolute success.